Good morning to you on this tiring and tight and terrifying and teaser of a Tuesday. It's the 2nd of April. It's the month where many of us will be a year older, both those online and offline, those who've tuned in and not tuned in. If you tuned in, you are on the fifth connection, and we are talking through the important issue of stick-to-itiveness. What does it look like, and what does it mean for Bible believers who have embraced Christ as the way? We are followers of the way, because in the book of Hebrews, the 5 warnings and the exhortations in the book have to do with stick with the program, keep on holding on. This is not the time to quit. It's too late to quit. For some, it's too early to quit. And for others of us, it's too late to quit. So let's keep on moving along and don't stand in danger of defecting or falling away. The first 4 verses of the storyline in chapter 1, the writer talks about what it means to stick to the one who is the superordinate Son. Who is he? He is the radiance of the glory of God, the outshining, the reflection, the apagasma of divinity. He shines out. And then in verse 5, from verse 5 of chapter 1 all the way to chapter 10, verse number 18, he is the superordinate walk because he's worthy, and he has shown us what that walk looks like. And then in 10:19 to the end of chapter 13, he's the superordinate way. He's no subby, but he has blazed the trail and shown us what personal voluntary sacrifice looks like, what it does, what it effects, and how that we never need to slit the throat of an animal, ever, because he shed his blood. He died on Calvary, gave his life as a ransom. This morning we are in chapter 10, verse number 19 to verse number 25. And when we think of measuring things that we can't see, think of what is involved in trying to measure something that you cannot see. You use an instrument that enhances your perception to make what is invisible to the human eye, the naked eye, to make it visible in terms of its presence and its effects through what we would call observable phenomena. So when we talk about enhancing perception, we use a tool like a microscope. You've heard the word, a microscope. It's a scope that gets us to be able to detect things that to the naked eye we may not be able to see, but under that scope, it produces what is invisible to the naked eye. It makes it larger than life so that we can see it. We use enhancing perception tools. Well, when we look at this issue of what affordances of choice do we have as a result of embodying faith? Because remember, we walk by faith and not by sight, and we don't put on glasses or a microscope to be able to see. If I can call it, our organ of perception is faith. What is faith? It's embodied fidelity, reliability, and trust. It's embodied. It's inside of this living organism. It's become part of me. It is part of me. It's not something outside of me that I constantly stutter over to be able to explain. But this whole thing of embodying faith becomes real in terms of my fidelity, my reliability, and my trust in the object in which I am placing my faith. So what affordances of choice, what benefits do we have as a result of embodying faith, when it becomes real to this organ of perception, which we call faith? Well, the writer in this section of the text is using exhortations, encouragements, in view of the superiority of Christ and his ministry to the old covenant. Remember, we have a new bargaining chip that makes the old bargaining chip, the old covenant, obsolete. And this patch fixes codes that are incomplete, policy updates that are deficient, and fixes bugs that the old chip cannot sort out. So in view of the superiority of Christ and his ministry, when compared to that of the old covenant, the writer is urging his readers not to persist in sin, but to persevere faithfully all the way from 10 verse 19 of the story to the end of the book in chapter 13 verse number 21. So persevere in faithfulness. What does that faithfulness look like? It expresses itself in faith in chapter 11, in chapter 12 in hope, and chapter 13 in love. And in that order, you have a triad, you have a triplication, like the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. Here you have another triplicate, a triad, faith, hope, and love. You have millions of triads in creation. You have water, which is a liquid, a solid, and a gas. And thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them that you encounter every day. Here you have a triplicate of what faithfulness looks like, what walking in perseverance looks like. It embodies faith, it embodies hope, and it embodies love. So loving one another and being personally pure and obeying leaders and leaving, for these Christian Hebrews, leaving Judaism. That was their biggie. Walk away from it. Men and women, it's a big thing to have to walk away from your cultural roots. It's no small thing. You cut away someone's cultural roots, you cut away their base for security. What the writer here is saying, you believers, followers of the way, you cannot be egoically attached to your culture. It's but a bridge to interact with reality. Because the past, your past history as believers shows that God honors faithfulness. And for those of us who have hope, he will honor that hope when he returns to fulfill his promises. So he's the superordinate way of faith, hope, and love in 10:19 to 13:21. He's the superordinate one in the first 4 verses of chapter 1. From verse 5 of chapter 1 to 10:18, he is the superordinate walk. He shows us what it looks like now to embark on the way. And so the warning here in 10:19 to 39 of the story is a warning against becoming faithless, bombing out, losing faith, going back to the old way. Because in view of their privileged status as believers and their earlier faithfulness as saints, even under persecution, the writer is exhorting the readers not to persist in sin. So they must experience, if they persist in sin, the avenging hand of God. But if they persevere in faithfulness, they will receive the promise, the eschatological promise, the reward of the future salvation when Christ returns. So what are the privileges that give affordances of choice? And we're going to go through this quite slowly. The privileged status of believers is to have free access by faith. Remember when little Joey or Johnny or Tabo comes to knock at your door and Tabo says, "Where is Isla? Where's my friend?" And before you can answer them, they slip right past you and they go right in and they go and meet their friend because they understand that they have access. You and I have 24/7 access. That's one of our first privileges that we have. That privilege is talked about in chapter 10, verse 19 and 20. We have access by faith. And the writer is about to make an appeal to the readers based upon two conclusions from the discussion that he was embarking on in the previous sections and previous episodes that we've talked through. So, number one, believers have access to the heavenly sanctuary through Christ's death. I have freedom to enter. There's no quota based upon my color that gives me access to play on this team. It's got nothing to do with color. It's got everything to do with the personal voluntary sacrifice of Christ on Calvary. I may not be a BEEE relevant person because I've met all the requirements, but I've met the one requirement. I have trusted Christ. That's what gives me access to the presence of God 24/7. So authorization for free access to the heavenly sanctuary is what this way is all about. And so the writer affirms as a conclusion in verse 19, therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter, there's the word, entry. We're not only concerned about outcomes in life, and particularly in the Christian life, we are concerned about entry into that life and participation in that life. And that's why the book of Ephesians, for example, talks about participation in this way, which is Christ. What is that participation about? It's about entry as a player and participating on the basis of my position on this team. And so I have access by faith. Where do I access? I access the holy places. What's the holy places? The sanctuary, the inner sanctum, the presence of God. Isn't that an amazing thing? The presence of God is what I have access to. How? By the blood of Christ, by the finished work of Christ, which ends any animal sacrifices. That's what the finished aspect is all about. We often talk about it is finished as the total work of Christ. When he utters the word, it stands finished for time and eternity, he is referring to as the one who personally, voluntarily sacrificed himself. He's saying, this is the end of animal sacrifices. That is what is in view in the words tetelestai. It's a perfect tense verb. It has reference to a past action with continuing results into the present. So I have access by his blood. That's what his finished work has achieved. No more the slitting of the throat of an animal. Now verse 20. That's the new and living way. By the new and living way which he opened up. It's a freshly slaughtered way, if we could put it that way. It's not the throat of a goat or a bull that's been slit. It's the blood of Christ, the life of Christ, the Son of God, that was given, that opened up a way for us. Watch the words. Through the curtain, through the veil. What's the veil? Not the curtain hanging in the temple. which could only be torn by 40 oxen pulling that curtain from opposite directions, which would tear it. 40 oxen. Yeah, when he gives his life, when he dies, the veil is torn in two. Here, the veil is his flesh. His life is given. And so verse 19 and verse 20 talks about access, a new and living way that leads to life made available to us by means of his death. And we need to ponder that. Let's not rush through these storylines to get to a particular point. Let's take our time and let it sink in. It's the personal voluntary sacrifice that effects this way. What personal voluntary sacrifices are you willing to make today for the benefit of others? Not yourself, others. He gave his life a ransom so that others may have a new lease on life long before they die. So think of some of the things. What 2, 3 things today would I have to lay my life down for, which carries great risk, but I'm willing to do that. Personal voluntary sacrifice, which will afford me other options for life and living. And that's what makes life exciting. You may think this morbid, but this is where life-giving sustenance emanates from. Personal voluntary sacrifice. I trust this is an encouragement to you today as you go into this month of April, that you would experience Christ as the one who has effected access for you into the throne room 24/7. Not by appointment, not confessions by appointment, but 24/7 access. I trust that you would have a good day. Go with God.